open up to questions. I've got a few. Anybody else ready to ask? Okay, I'll ask the first one then. Did you watch the recent speech where Zizek gives a critique of Buddhism? And if you did, can you tell us what you think of his critique of Buddhism?
Yeah, it was an interesting speech. When I first heard that Zizek is giving a speech about Buddhism, I said, wow, okay, but then I said, well, it's not that wow, because now Zizek can speak about everything. He's a star. Some said like, oh, what does Zizek know about Buddhism? Well, okay, I watched the speech, yeah, he knows something, okay, he read these famous books from Suzuki and from, which all we read when we were young. And what came to my mind is that he criticized Buddhism in 2 points. He says Buddhism has 2 problems. The first problem is with the what was it? The Bodhisattva. Yeah, the Bodhisattva. So in Mahayana Buddhism there is this Bodhisattva is the person who attains enlightenment and then helps other people or other creatures to attain enlightenment. And enlightenment is called nirvana. And okay, Zizek says that nirvana is doesn't mean that you cross somewhere else. You still stay here. You are at the same level with other people. You didn't leave the place. It reminds me of one Zen story. Like a monk says, before I started studying Zen, I looked at the mountains as they were mountains. After I started studying, I looked at the mountains as there were no mountains. But after I got so deep into Zen Buddhism, I looked at the mountains and they were mountains. So reaching nirvana doesn't mean that you go somewhere else. And then he criticized that Bodhisattva is a person who has returned to help the other creatures. And here I think he's a little bit wrong, because Bodhisattva didn't return, because Bodhisattva postponed his or her enlightenment in order to enlighten the other creatures. And on the other hand, he's trying to use the Western logic for a teaching that has no non-Western logic. In the Buddhist way of thinking, there is no this kind of logical thinking. Even if they say that he has returned, that doesn't mean that after getting nirvana he has gone beyond. He has returned means that he is among the people to help them. Not that he ever went somewhere or came back. And then he has another point that criticizes, it's exactly this enlightenment. Like when you work in Buddhism and you come to some enlightenment and you realize the truth, and you are the enlightened being, that he says that he read books and he talked to people and he's not bullshitting, and even some Buddhists agree that you can attain enlightenment by taking other substances, mushrooms or leaves or anything else. And then some Buddhists even agree that it's totally the same experience, and there is a big debate about it. So he finds this as a problem. But I don't see this as a problem so much. As I talking to one friend, she reminded me that when you work on enlightenment as a Buddhist, and when you reach the enlightenment, then you stay there. But after you take some pills and you become enlightened today or tonight, the next day when you wake up, are you still enlightened, or you're back at the previous situation? And then the next thing, you still have to take the pill to be enlightened again. So it goes over and over and over. So you don't actually reach the enlightenment. That's my understanding. Sorry I've been so long.
Oh no, that's fine. Other questions?
Comment? I don't know.
Okay, comments okay.
I remember this part about Buddhism, and a part of the Buddhism as a philosophical system. The Zizek was criticizing Buddhism as its version on the West. That actually it's supposed to be, a way of liberation, but on the West, it is used by, let's say, overworked, businessmen to kind of restore their energies and their capacities to even work more efficient within the system,
Yeah.
That they use it as a tool to kind of, be even more into the system and make it run it better. So I think that was a big point of Zizek's discussion of Buddhism and the role of Buddhism on the West.
Yeah, okay. I mean, fine, I don't disagree. I just this is what came to my mind because I heard about that even before Zizek, that someone was talking about Zen as a, what do you say, as a kind of therapy, cure in the West.
Okay, other questions? Wait, well, can you describe what is exactly a Hegelian dialectic?
I told you not to ask me this kind of question.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Well, okay. No, actually, I remember something. Okay, great. He says that everything goes in a circle, but when it reached the point, it reached on a higher level. So it's more like a spiral. So it's not like this yin and yang, like from white to black and from black to white, and you're always going in a circle. But each time you make a circle, then you have reached another level. So he called them thesis. You have the thesis. Then you put on the thesis antithesis, and you come with something else which is called synthesis. So that's the one circle of the dialectic.
Is that what Zizek tries to do when he talks, or is not really?
I don't know what he's trying to do, but that's in the basis of Marxism, the dialectic. So the dialectic was important for Marxism. It goes like this in traditional Marxism. That you have, Marx was talking mostly about workers, those people who work in factories mostly. You have some material, which is the thesis, and then you have the worker, which is the antithesis, and then from this material there is a product, which is the synthesis. And by this he was trying to explain how capitalism is bad and people were exploited. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does. Other questions? All right. Go ahead.
Would you agree? Because Zizek seems to be very chaotic. He talks about many things, from cinema to the toilets. I don't know. Have you heard about his analysis of European toilets, right? Yeah. Architecture, psychoanalysis, capitalism, Marxism, Hegel, all of those things. And would you agree for me, the glue that keeps all this together, that seemingly appears very chaotic, but it's not, is something that Zizek is obsessed with, which is ideology. He always traces the work of ideology in all those things and try to kind of bring it up and show you that that's what we see, it's just a surface. No matter where we look at, we can see the surface, but behind it, there's a huge work done by ideology. And what is your take on that?
Yeah, I don't know, I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, he sees ideology probably in everything. And maybe that's why he doesn't try to give a solution, because it could be an ideology. Yeah. I remember when he was talking about the trash, something about the trash. I can't recall now, but he had also, what was your point about the toilet, and the trash the same? Or
no? I didn't remember trash, the toilet. You remember toilets?
No.
He associated with different philosophical systems, I remember that.
No, I don't.
German, French and English toilet.
Japanese as well.
He had Japanese too?
I think so. It was like how you face your past, how you face your own deeds, wasn't it?
I didn't hear the Japanese.
I don't know, I haven't seen that.
But anyway, the German was, how was it? Let me think. Okay, French was like, there's a hole in the toilet, so the excrements disappear right away. And that's supposed to represent like kind of French Revolution, that they take shit out of the way and that's it. And then the German one was that there's this kind of shelf, some sort of shelf in the toilet, so the shit stays there. So you're supposed to kind of take it slow, analyze it, like this is this kind of rational thinking, and mysticism, that take a while, and stay healthy, and something like that. And then the third one was English, that they have a toilet in which which is filled up with water, and the instruments are floating. So it kind of represents this liberalism, you know, that is let it flow, let it be, you know, this kind of thing. So how he was associating that.
Yeah.
But you know, he sees the ideology in the architecture of the toilets also. So.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be interesting if we can bring Zizek here in Taiwan.
Yeah.
See how would he analyze the toilets and maybe Starbucks. I didn't. Okay, I didn't see in Starbucks that they have charity falling here in Starbucks. I don't know.
Well, just something Michael mentioned, like about like breaking down or like bringing out ideologies just to prove how unsustainable they are. But like, can actually Zizek be also like, does he belong to like deconstructivist movement as well? Because he is kind of like postmodernist as well, right? Like following Lacan. But then, I mean, I'm not that familiar, so like for me it's a bit confusing how he's like firmly following like Hegelian line, which is like based on like firm structure. But then on the other side, like, you know,
Psychoanalysis. Then psychoanalysis.
yeah, then like breaking down ideologies, like.
I don't know.
Or
it's
maybe
not
that's
in
more
his
on the level of like
Well,
a cultural critic.
He's often criticized that he relies too much on this guy Lacan. I mean, probably no one heard him. And he relies too much on him, and probably he shouldn't do that. I don't know. It's up to experts to answer.
Because it seems that his style of analysis is very postmodern. He picks up things
Yeah.
from many different contexts, but he puts it together to this kind of ideology realm, you know, based on the psychoanalysis, Lacanian psychoanalysis. So there is always this kind of core that enables him, that makes him, you know, see things in a particular way. So maybe he's not too postmodern in this regard.
Okay, other questions?
Yeah, don't rely on Lacan. I will agree with that. But just to make sure what you're saying, does he rely on Hegel then? Does he turn to Hegel and have a Hegelian ethic?
Oh, as I said, I wouldn't really wouldn't really answer exactly this question. I just know that.
Or somewhat,
Yeah. Sorry.
or you know, somewhat loosely, generally.
Yeah. It's
It
he
sounds like
relies
he
on-
might.
I think he relies on Hegel. Like when we to interpret Marxism for him
Right.
means to go back to Hegel.
Okay.
Like because for the Orthodox communists or Marxists, it was go away with Hegel. Okay, we take from Hegel what we need, and then we forget about him. And it's Marx, and Marx is the god, the communist god. But now he says no. Let's go back to Hegel actually, and to see what he has to contribute to
Right.
Marxism.
Well, I think that's good because, as you were saying, you know, Hegel respected history and human experience, I think, and then for whatever reputation he has as, like, you know, the ultra high philosopher, he did recognize that reality. That human experience was at the core, and that's why you have thesis, antithesis, and synthesis, right? That's what leads from step A to step B. And so if he does that, great. But actually I have two questions. One, you said he hesitated to state a solution, and isn't that a failure? Don't we need solutions, you know, in this day and age more than ever?
It depends how you look. It can be a failure.
Oh, well,
But
you know,
it's-
maybe that's a strong way to put it, but it is falling short.
But it's better than to give a bad solution.
Yeah, so come up with a good solution.
Yeah, but I think if we are talking about people like Zizek today, like postmodern, it's like there is no failure or success. It's all what you can do with it by yourself. You can find a solution, concrete solution for concrete measure, for concrete events. Like
If it is a solution.
if it is a solution, yeah. But I don't know. Do you see it as a failure?
Yeah, in a way I do, because I think there are people out there that are offering solutions of, you know, varying values and varying, you know, credibility and whatever. every politician is offering a solution.
All right. Okay.
But give him credit that, you know, do you like Obama's solutions or do you like Newt Gingrich's solutions?
I have to say this at the beginning. I'm not going to agree or disagree with Zizek's ideas. So don't get me wrong.
Okay.
I see it's good. And as for the politicians, they have to do solutions. Otherwise, how would they be elected? If Zizek was a politician and said, "I don't have a solution," you elect me, and then you can find.
He tried to be.
He tried. I don't know if he tried the same tactic.
Yeah,
Run for
he
election.
was for the presidential election in
There you go.
Slovenia.
But I don't know if he used the same tactic.
Yeah, but
Because
he did.
1990.
I guess he had a
It was a
program
long
that
time ago.
He had a program, right?
Yes,
He
of
did
course.
try that.
He had
did
to-
try that.
Okay. Anyway, so politicians
That's interesting. You did.
need to have solutions, of course. But Zizek doesn't need to have a solution.
But I think that his power lies in staying beyond this kind of, you know, different solutions, fighting with each other. He
You're always
stays-
going to have that. You're always going to have that. That's why he's a
Stays out.
philosopher. That's why
Yeah.
he's a philosopher. Fair
Exactly.
enough. Fair enough. But I think even Hegel, in his way, offered solutions. You know, that you could look at, and certainly philosophers since then. And it just worries me that you're not willing to take that stand.
No, I don't. How to say? I don't agree that he not having a solution is a good thing. I don't say that. But I understand why doesn't he have a solution? Because he, as a Marxist in the 21st century, he doesn't dare to give a solution because the last of his same, let's say, from the same branch people, the other communists from the Cold War, they had a solution, and what did they do?
Right.
And some of those who are in power with solutions, they killed millions.
Yes. Yes.
So he doesn't dare to be one of those.
Well, of course not. And nobody will.
So that's why he doesn't have a
Nobody
solution.
will, right? Because that's no solution, right? That's no solution at all. And
But-
nobody would agree to that.
Okay, then I will ask you a question. He doesn't have a solution, but he criticizing global capitalism. What do you think about it?
I have nothing against criticizing global capitalism,
Alright.
right? I'm not quite the leftist that some are, but I have nothing against that. Yeah, it's certainly subject to criticism. We could go into that argument, right? At the same time, though, you know, you've got your I'm forgetting his name now. End of history.
The other guy.
The other guy, end of history, right? And although his argument has been attacked and largely deconstructed, there's still there's a nugget of truth to it that was the solution, right? Those ideas, those democratic capitalist, if you will, those ideas did offer the best solution.
Which idea, sorry?
Capitalism and democracy, linked as they are, right? Nobody's going to say capitalism's the end of all solutions, not at all, right? And yet it does seem to provide more for more people more often than the other solutions did, right? And so a lot of people still abide by that. They still do say it still did better, certainly did better than communism.
Yeah.
I think.
Well, wait, because it's very important. Zizek says this many times, very clearly.
And I'm not arguing the point, I'm just bringing it up.
He said exactly what he's saying. That he said it's harder to imagine the end of capitalism than the end of the world. On his analysis of the movies and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's exactly what he's saying. That we perceive capitalism that it gave us so much, and and a huge amount of people are better off than ever before, and think. But this is just a phase that
in a
it's
way.
been there, and then
In a way, right. It's kind of a phase that's
maybe should go away. Maybe.
it may very well go away. Yes. Can I bring up one last thing? Can we? Do we have time?
We have lots of time, actually. I just want to mention something.
Okay.
I was watching a speech today, a short speech by Zizek, and he specifically said that we have to end, and this is almost a quote, but just paraphrased, end the marriage between capitalism and democracy.
Hear, hear.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, this is a separate point. I like your basic discussion of like, you know, the closed office workers and those that are not, and the dialectics and the dialogues. And I'm sure there's truth in that. But it seems like it might be a little overstated that there have been philosophers from the West, let's say, that I think the door has been open and that they have offered, you know, essentially universalistic solutions that address, you know, all concerns on the table as such that they can. I'm thinking of people like John Rawls and William James, Sigmund Freud, Charles Peirce, and John Dewey. They're pretty universal in what they did. Those doors were open. They were conversing with others.
Well,
And so I see your point, but I'm not sure that you can really depend on that, you know, all the way through.
okay, first, I didn't say that they were not universal. And second, I said we should take this loosely.
I know you did. I
And
know. I know.
you know, like, they also had friends and communicated, and they deal with universal
course.
problems.
Right.
But I was saying about how they brought their ideas onto the, when they're writing, they're in a dialogue with themselves, and they say, this goes and arguments and explanations, and this looks like an office worker who is dealing, like, someone put him inside and said, okay, you have, I don't know, 1 year or 6 months to finish a 300 pages book, and that's it, no communication with anyone else. So my point was about their method, their methodology, how to come with ideas. Do I make myself clear about it?
You can
I
find
see the
examples supporting what you're saying, like Heidegger or Lenin, you know? They used to write in isolation, you know?
Right.
You can always
that's
find...
That's a different
But I
phase.
guess you...
That's not John Dewey. John Dewey was totally open to the world and what was necessary and what was needed to make things better.
Yeah, but he was still like an office worker. If you read John Dewey, isn't it same like office worker?
I'm sorry?
I mean, when you read his books, aren't they written in the same way as all the other books in the Western philosophy?
I'm not sure. You know,
Well, I'm not sure either because
Yeah,
I
that's hard
remember
to say. That's hard. That's a hard thing to say. Right.
But okay, let's say Kant, for example. He is known.
Kant, yeah.
Immanuel Kant is known that he every afternoon he took a walk
I know.
and he had a good afternoon to the shops, and then he went to the harbor's cantina and drink beer with sailors. But we don't know what he was talking about.
Nobody knew what
With
he
the
was talking
sailors.
about. Sure.
But
they
it doesn't
knew him.
matter.
They did know him. Everybody
Yeah,
said
yeah.
we knew him.
But when he
was
wrote-
out, he was out in the neighborhood.
Right, but when he
really
wrote
was.
his books, he was closed in his office writing the book.
He may have been, but this is Kant too. That's a different age too. The philosophers I mentioned are like 1918,
Right,
70
okay.
and beyond.
Now it's
right.
becoming more, I mean,
Right.
with TV and internet, it's all of course.
Well, that's
Harder
a
to
whole
stay
other
isolated.
thing.
There's
Right,
It's
yeah.
not just Zizek, we can say Harvey and who other modern philosopher?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But okay, you get your point.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
I have another question. I'm wondering, did Marx and Hegel, did they have access or were they familiar with ancient Chinese philosophies?
I don't know about Marx, but Hegel was, because he wrote a history of philosophy where the first chapter is about Eastern philosophy. He wrote about Indian and Chinese philosophy.
Right. I think Hegel even studied Chinese,
Oh, okay, I'm not sure about that.
maybe.
But he wrote about, and since Hegel was Marx's favorite reading, I guess Marx also knew about Chinese philosophy. Because Marx starts from Hegel. Was he in his class or something? I don't know. Or he wasn't even born when Hegel taught, anyway.
Okay, other questions?
Wasn't it really dismissive of Eastern philosophy?
Yeah.
And maybe
You're talking about Hegel?
due to his standpoint, actually, the Westerners didn't maybe
Oh, yeah,
show
okay.
much interest in it.
No, that's very interesting. Now we can come back to Zizek. Hegel, yeah, he has a very low view on Eastern philosophy and Chinese philosophy too. He says Chinese philosophers didn't get, as I remember, didn't attain the absolute, or didn't come to the abstract idea of the being. I'm trying to paraphrase. So this is not really a philosophy. So the real philosophy is not in the West. And here, if we take Zizek as a Hegelian and the speech he gave about Buddhism, you can see that he says like there are only two ethics in the world, the real ethics, the Buddhist ethic and the Judeo-Christian. And which one is better? The Judeo-Christian, of course. That's what Zizek says. So he's following the
Yeah.
Hegelian lines of dismissing the Eastern thought and everything that comes, or most of it that comes from
Judging
China.
the Western logic.
Yeah.
Okay, other questions?
But do you know, because I want to relate to what you said about capitalism and liberal democracy coming together. And the Zizek talk about, I don't know if you had the chance to see that talk, Zizek talk about the example of that when they don't come together, which is in China.
The capitalism and democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you know what Zizek said about that?
I don't know. But there are many cases. Vietnam is also capitalism.
He said that China does capitalism better than the United States, but in a more, I would say, twisted way or something like that, devious way.
No, I don't know. If you know about it, say more.
Well, I have another question. You mentioned that you said he may not know the solutions, but does he say what some of the problems are? Does he mention what he thinks?
But I think he always talks about that. Doesn't
Yeah,
he?
but I mean, could you give a few examples?
Few examples. I think that comes to my mind.
About capitalism specifically? Or
Well, I mentioned
what
capitalism
were the problems that with
capitalism with human face? Isn't that one of the main problems he explains? How to make a bigger profit by presenting yourself as a charity person, like making good to the other people who you don't know. So it makes you feel good too because you help other people.
But he says that this is dangerous because you don't want to quit the system. You want to improve it a little bit, you know, without changing it. So it still is not functioning well. It's just a bit better than before. So that's that's the kind of illusion that you create, and it makes you stay within it.
I agree.
And I think, you said he may not know the solutions, but it seems like he gives suggestions, at least. The speech that I was watching today, where he talks about how the marriage of democracy and capitalism is a problem, he mentions Wall Street a lot. Oh, and I wish I could remember everything that he said, but he talked about how the leaders of Wall Street are creating a lot of the problems, so that new leaders need to be found, and not leaders that will marry themselves to capitalism.
So what's the question?
My question is, do you know of any small suggestions
I
that
guess-
he's made?
Right.
No, but this is, as you said, this is already a suggestion. Yeah. But would he agree the leaders of capitalism to be communists, like they are in China and Vietnam and other countries? That's a kind of does this become a kind of oxymoron, a capitalist communist?
Right, he mentions
Or
that.
maybe not.
He mentions that in the exact same speech.
Right?
Yeah, he mentions that in the exact
Okay.
same speech.
Well, maybe they are not, because we often confuse communism with social democracy. Because when we say the communist country in the 80s, no, there were no communist countries. There were socialist countries. There was never a communist country. If we are talking about economy, there was socialist country. Politically, because the communists were in power, they were a communist country. But communism as economy never existed. So they were socialists. So and the West for themselves call themselves democracies, while during the Cold War, the Eastern Bloc called them capitalists, which are still totally different points. Capitalism is also an economical category, and democracy is a political. They're totally different. So we had before non-democratic capitalist societies. We had like the totalitarianism, and we have now in China and Vietnam. And could we have also probably Zizek, that he would like that probably, the social democrats on power and having a capitalist society with a non-human face anymore. With a human face without laugh and without without anger.
Without a mask.
Yeah, without a mask.
You think the Nordic model is the ideal model then?
Which model?
The Nordic model?
Oh, I'm not very familiar with it, but we are. I think it's often very praised, this model. Yeah, yeah. I don't really know what the model is, but
Pretty much.
since I was a kid, like from the 80s, and I was raised in a socialist, same country as Zizek,
Huh.
but that time, not now.
Yeah.
And we heard, yeah, we are socialists, but the Nordics, they are really very good socialists.
Right.
They do it better.
Yes.
Without Marxism.
So I don't know. So maybe they were the ideal for.
Uh-huh. I've wondered if
Could
that's...
they be Zizek's ideals? I don't know. We should ask Zizek.
He could be on that line. But I've wondered if that was the next wave that has to take place in the United States, even. I've had friends of mine in the United States who have, harshly criticized me for even suggesting it, right? Because, it's just all Marxism all over again. But I've wondered. You think that the United States could adopt a
The
Nordic
USA
model?
is very anti-socialist.
Pretty
That's-
much.
Yeah,
But
that's the main
We're also
major
very
problem.
solution oriented, and so
Pragmatic.
if Norway works, right?
Yeah, but
Can it work for us?
I've read somewhere that the number of population is also an important factor. Yeah?
True.
These are small
true.
countries, so
Well, that's true, but I don't really follow that. I think it can be adapted. Into,
maybe it's just excuse to not try.
It is an excuse, right? It can be adapted. And, Norway and Sweden and Finland and Switzerland and those types, they're large enough that it can be adapted to larger countries, I think.
Right.
Could you maybe explain what the Nordic model is?
Yeah.
Just a social democracy with socialist kind of socialism,
More like a welfare state, right?
welfare state kind of thing. You might say that. You might say that.
Also what is happening in Germany, I would say.
Yeah,
That's
in
not
ways,
one
right. In
It's a
ways,
bigger
it's across
But
Europe,
it's
right,
still a
right.
capitalist country, right?
Yes, indeed it is, pretty
Okay,
much,
well, then-
pretty much.
With social concern.
With social concern, right, kind of like that, right. And it seems to work for them pretty well.
Yeah, it worked for years. But I would like to add something here: the geostrategic position. They live in an area where no one wants to go, and they don't have enemies. They don't have threats, and that's very important. Like,
Yeah,
except Finland.
I don't think they're
Huh?
quite, I don't know if they're quite connected. The threats that they face, which are all kind of nil, that's true, versus the threats that the United States faces, which are different. That's true. That is all true. And I suppose that would make
well,
a
maybe it
difference.
helps. Maybe it's not really true, but I wouldn't imagine on the Balkans to have that kind of country. People probably wouldn't.
Uh-huh.
Plus,
All the others will try to.
societies are quite homogenic there. Maybe it's also,
Well, there are pretty large immigrant populations in the Nordic countries, right?
Yeah, but
In
that
Germany
yeah,
And
recently.
Switzerland.
and
It's,
Switzerland,
uh,
yeah.
But that was Breivik's point, and to go back to Zizek again, because he studied Breivik's after he found out that there is a manifest written in 1,000 pages, and he said Breivik was not a lunatic. His arguments are totally logical. Like he can find everything argumentated there. He had a point. Well, it's a violent, of course, but he had kind of point against the immigrants.
Can you talk about what are some of? I mean, I don't know why I keep coming back to this
Doesn't matter.
because you keep going back to Starbucks. But what are Zizek's okay? Maybe this is a better question. Are Zizek's critiques of capitalism identical to Marx's critiques of capitalism, or how do they differ?
Oh. Again, I will say I'm not an expert in this, but I heard both, that he is trying to use a different critique, of course, because different time now, the socialist program already failed, so he's trying to do a critique on another way. But there are also other thinkers who criticize him that he understands the situation of today's capitalism, and it was as it was in the 19th century, like in the time of Marx. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, but I
So
mean,
he didn't, like,
how sorry, how do those critics say that he's wrong in those terms? I mean,
I don't know the details really.
Right.
Or
But if you say, like, okay, let's think, how was the situation in 19th century? Like, it was an industrialized society, and Marx was talking mostly about workers, people who really workers, like who go to factories, and people who work on the fields, like agriculturalists. And for Marx, everybody was a proletariat, the working class. Even the teachers are working class because they have other bosses. Whenever you have someone, you work for someone, you have another boss, then you are a proletariat. So even if you work for the state is your boss, so you're still working class.
But in that time, the biggest difference between 19th century Marxism and nowadays, the neo-Marxism. Why is neo-Marxism? Because at that time, Marx and others, they were waiting for revolution, and now we know that it didn't really happen to the extent that they were waiting. And Lacanian perspective is they operate on different levels, and the Marxists, they talk about the class struggle and why revolution didn't happen and how to activate the social class to make it happen. But it's kind of hardcore. Marxists still talk about it, but the Lacanian analysis goes more into the psychic level of how capitalism actually works through its ideology again, to make us not feel this struggle, to make us adapt into the system and not really feel that we are exploited. So it works on a little different level. They could go together, but so I think that Zizek, although he's more on Lacanian side, he also has some insights crossing this line and drawing on the neo-Marxist perspective.
so he has maybe even a better or more modern critique.
Yeah, more up to date.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Thanks for the comment.
Alex, do you know anything about David Harvey?
I used to, but I forgot it. No, David Harvey was the guy who talked about city geography and
Oh, yeah.
Gentrification.
yeah, and we had a speech by Michael. He knows more about it. Yeah, but it was a very similar critique of modern capitalism.
Because when you were just talking about, like, my previous question, you said Zizek's critics criticize him because he may or he doesn't take into account the way the world works now. But then, I mean, I've also watched speeches from David Harvey, and if Zizek doesn't take into account the modern world, then David Harvey must be living, even in a further time beyond in the past.
Because he's on the neo-Marxist side, still waiting for revolution.
Oh, he's still waiting for revolution.
But he offers solutions, He offers solutions like, more control, more state control, on banking and stuff. So
Right.
he advocates that. Zizek, no.
Well, are there other questions? Because if not, maybe you just want to say some final thoughts.
Okay, what can I be my final thoughts? I personally don't agree or disagree. I mean, I didn't come here in order to impose ideas of Zizek. But a thinker like this, we should probably take in mind and see what he's talking about. Even if we disagree, we can criticize him, because thought is always developing, and Zizek is the part of this process of developing thought, and we can develop his thought further into other places.
Well, one more thing, just last thing. Because everyone talks about Zizek as a Elvis Presley of cultural theory. But don't you think that he's more like Frank Zappa, you know? Really? No, really, I'm serious.
I don't know.
What do you think?
Obviously.
Yeah.
Maybe like Beastie Boys.
I wonder if people say he's the Elvis of cultural theory because maybe some people in other parts of the world don't exactly know who Frank Zappa is. And if they did, they would say, "Oh, forget this Elvis Presley thing." I think the reason they say that is just because he's popular and famous.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Alex.
Shiki shiki baba, soskena magrama. Shiki shiki baba.